This video is my beginner's guide to the most hated deck in hat format, Infernity. So let's get going with some example deck lists I have here. I'm not going to read the effects of each monster, but you can pause the video and read what each one does if you are not familiar with the cards. Infernity, very strong, not the most popularly played deck because it is must be prepared for, or it can just steamroll you. Big reason that this deck is hated, as I said, is because its game plan essentially is to create non-interactive games by just comboing off turn 1 or turn 2 if it wasn't quite all there turn 1, and just rolling over the opposition. This build, the first build that I showed here, the main thing that I will say about it is that it plays Photon Thrasher, not a card that every Infernity player will play, for the simple reason that this card is terrible to draw kind of after turn 1, later than turn 1. If you draw it after you've comboed, there's no way to really get it out of your hand, and that can turn off all of your Infernity plays. So it is pretty much a risk reward. It is a warrior, so you can search it with reinforcements, but as you'll see, the next two lists do not play Photon Thrasher. And this list also only has 2 Lavalval Chain. I think 2 Lavalval Chain is perfectly fine. But you'll see other builds will play 3. This build is maining Trap Stun, unlike the last build, which was siding it. Not a whole lot of cards are able to be sided in and out in Infernity. Probably if you're siding more than 6 or 7 cards, you're over-siding for Infernity, because a lot of the core cards, the same cards that you see here that you saw in the last list in the main deck, are going to have to stay in the main deck. This list has 2 or 3 instant fusion. I think the last one had 2, so maybe you can side one of these out in a list that plays 3 comfortably. You're pretty much never going to be siding out Soul Charge. I mean, you need, you really, really want to see Soul Charge. I shouldn't say that you absolutely need it, but it is extremely helpful in extending the combo. I like this list for playing 1 Compulse, not just relying on the Infernity traps. And then this list even sides hands, which is not something that a ton of Infernity does in my experience against them, but I think definitely something you can do. So that's interesting. We'll look at the last list here and then get into some combos. So this list, Compulse and Warning, back to 2 instant fusion, just 2 Lance. 2 Lance seems good to me. Lance, only really great when you are going second. But yeah, most of the cards are the same between the decks in the main deck. It gets a little bit different in the side deck here. What you decide to side. I think siding is probably a little bit difficult to do in Infernity. Like I said, you can't side too many cards. You have to really choose what is worth it to side, while also keeping the core combo strategy intact. This list only has one Diamond Dire Wolf, which I find strange. Usually you see multiple Diamond Dire Wolf because you'll use one Diamond Dire to pop your own monster to continue to combo with Infernity Launcher. But okay, we've looked at these lists. Let's look at the first combo video, part of the video. This is an example of when you have just Infernity Archfiend, Infernity Necromancer, and Dark Grepher in hand. With just these three cards, the other cards are not really important. So I have the MST set, but with these three cards, you can go off quite nicely, even without Soul Charge. So this is a combo that you definitely need to know playing Infernity. I've skipped a step here in that you summon the Dark Grepher, you discard Infernity Archfiend to send from deck the Street Patrol. Street Patrol gets banished to summon Necromancer. Necromancer summons Archfiend. And then when it's summoned, you'll search for the second Necromancer. Lobobble Chain, almost always the first XYZ made in this deck's combo. So we banish the second Street Patrol, summon the second Necromancer, and this time we will get Launcher, I believe. Diamond Direwolf to clear the Levier, Launcher to get back both Necromancer. So we still haven't searched any Infernity traps because we're building to that. Can use the Street Patrol that we brought back with Levier finally, and then we search our first trap, the limited Infernity Barrier. Now we're going to send Eris, so Eris can get its Grave Effect and search the only other Archfiend we play besides Infernity Archfiend, the only other Archfiend card we play, Palabyrinth. But before we get a summon off of Palabyrinth, we still have the second Necromancer to use. So now we have 2 of the 4 traps. Whoops. So there I'm using Palabyrinth to banish a fiend to summon another Archfiend. Get the search. And I believe that pretty much ends the combo. So you have 3 traps searched. There's only one other trap that could have been searched. I think pretty much to extend to get all 4 traps, you maybe don't need Soul Charge. Definitely Soul Charge will get you there, but need some sort of extension. Maybe Instant Fusion. There's a way. Something. That is one thing I will say about this deck. It's fun to just play solitaire with this deck and, you know, play out hands and see what you can do turn 1. Because that really is the game plan, to just go off turn 1 and try to set up the best board you can to make it so your opponent can't really play the game. I don't remember exactly what this combo was. I think I just did some test hands. We're just looking at some test hands and using all 6 cards instead of putting some back or anything like that. But so here we opened, you know, nothing with Infernity in the name except for Launcher. That's still going to be good because it's very easy to send things from deck to grave in this deck with Lobobble Chain. So that is definitely what we're going to be doing. Overlaying with Street Patrol, no doubt. This card wasn't in any of the example decks that I showed, but it is It's a tech that I tried out in with my version of Infernity. Just one copy of this card, um, because it makes it so that you can keep no cards in hand for a turn by just simply not having to draw. And if you play multiples of this, it's the same as Reckless Greed, where you will only skip the next draw phase, even if you use like 3 of these somehow in one turn. But definitely going to be using the Street Patrol now. But not something, Offerings to the Doom, not something you're always seeing played, because even though you want no cards in hand, you really might need to still draw some cards. You're looking to draw Soul Charge if you haven't drawn Soul Charge. If you've stacked an Archfiend with Laval Chain, which is something you can do towards the end of the combo, or something I've seen done a lot if the Infernity player gets Max Seed, which is definitely a card that everyone is playing. Definitely partly or largely because of Infernity. Oh, I guess I searched. I thought I searched the wrong thing there. I will say I'm definitely not the most experienced Infernity player on the planet, but I have played against it and played with it enough that I'm happy to share what I know. So we're still stuck with these 2 cards that we started with. Could have used the Upstart right at the beginning. It's definitely dangerous to wait to use it, because you could draw a monster and then all your traps are going to be dead. So probably could have fired the Upstart right at the beginning. Well, I was afraid to draw another monster probably, because you can, if you clog on normal summons, it is possible to not be able to combo. So I sacrificed essentially an entire card from my hand by not using this to ensure that I could combo. And my next draw would be Summoner Monk and Dark Grepher, which are, with this board, bricks. If the opponent doesn't attack over one of these, and then you draw something you can't summon and you have something stuck in your hand, that can be crippling for Infernity. So Infernity, it really requires the pilot to play optimally at all points of the game, and it can be very tricky to juggle all the things that you're trying to do. So definitely playing solitaire with a deck, like I said, is going to be beneficial to you to learn the deck the best. So this is an interesting hand to open with, because we have Soul Charge, but the rest of our hand is really quite weak, because we open 3 traps. Those are not going to help us combo. The 2 Infernity traps are supposed to be what we plus off of the combo, so even if we're comboing, there's only 2 more to get anyway. But we use Grepher and then Soul Charge, essentially like an Infernity launcher, to get more surges, pluses, and combo. Street Patrol, no doubt. We still haven't used Necromancer, but we have to have no cards in hand to use Necromancer. So Infernity, it's really not, it's hoping to not grind too long of a game, right? It's not trying to get to turn 10 or 20. It wants to win fast. It wants to dominate turn 1. Oh, okay, yeah, I knew there was a point where I searched something wrong here, I think. Yeah, so at some point I realized, yes, I needed to actually search Necromancer last to keep this combo going. Archfiend Surge, now we get the 3rd trap. So I said this hand was not the best. I definitely shouldn't have said that. I mean, Soul Charge really takes you there. It's basically the same. In this hand, it was basically the same as if I had opened, well, almost the same as if I had opened Infernity Launcher. Even better than opening Launcher, really, because then you can search Launcher after having used Soul Charge. And then it's like using a second Soul Charge, second Launcher, double Launcher, all the combo. So we got all the traps. Considering to not even search, right? Because it is an option. You can add, so you have the choice. You don't have to search, but really no reason not to still, right? Because we've got a Street Patrol from having brought it back a long time ago. Key Beetle will protect, probably the barrier, but really anything you want. Sometimes I consider not protecting barrier because I'm going to use barrier, and maybe I want Key Beetle to actually be able to survive like a Dark Hole, because if the opponent has MST for this and then Dark Hole, it would be nice to keep the biggest monster on board. And then, drawing Lance on the next turn after having done all this is pretty good because you can say, like, draw phase, fire, trap stun, and then you have an open space to use this if then you need to chain, like, a break or something like that. Okay. And using Key Beetle on Infernity Barrier does make a lot of sense, because if your opponent does have MST and Dark Hole, then you don't want the Infernity Barrier to get MST'd. So it makes perfect sense to protect it with Beetle, because the opponent would have to have Dark Hole to get you to use the barrier, and then barrier's gone, and then something to follow up with that's quite strong, like Fire Hand and Forbidden Lance, to then break the Infernity board. But this is another example of why Infernity is so hard to play, because I do think that what you protect with Key Beetle is not always the same card. Slight differences in games will make one decision that is normally correct incorrect, and vice versa. Lastly, I want to talk about beating Infernity, so let's talk about my two favorite cards in doing so, Max C and DD Crow. Both of these hand traps will make it a lot more difficult for Infernity to combo. Max C forces the Infernity player to either stop comboing or combo and let their opponent draw many cards. DD Crow can stop the combo altogether by preemptively banishing a Stygian Street Patrol. You can't wait to chain to Street Patrol's effect, as Street Patrol banishes for cost. And you can also DD Crow a Necromancer target or a Soul Charge target, because yes, Soul Charge does target. However, if the Infernity player has gotten to a point where they are targeting 3, 4, or 5 monsters with charge, DD Crow might not be enough to stop the upcoming combo. So what I recommend is that between the main and the side, you either main most of these cards or side all of them, doesn't matter too much, because even if you side all of them, you'll have them games 2 and 3, and you should win game 2 because of the amount of hate you're bringing in. So play 3 Max, 3 Crow, Dark Hole, MST, or Spiritualism, depending on your deck strategy. Typically, MST or Artifact Ignition, if you're playing artifacts, will be handier because you can also destroy the continuous spell Infernity Launcher when it's activated on the Infernity player's turn. Spiritualism I would play if you're also playing a combo deck, and additionally Needle Sealing and XYZ Universe are traps that can disrupt an established Infernity board as long as Infernity Barrier is no longer available to them. Staple traps that are often already played, like Torrential Tribute, Compulsory Evacuation Device, Solemn Warning, and Bottomless Trap Hole, coupled with Max C and Crow, should have plenty of disruption to leave their board weak for your own monsters to be able to thrive. There's also Black Horn of Heaven. And remember that main decking Max and Crow is an option because they can help against other decks trying to abuse Soul Charge like Sylvan and Mythic Rulers, so they're not just for Infernity. I know this video has been a little bit all over the place, but I hope it helps people understand Infernity better, how to play Infernity, and how to beat Infernity. I decided not to show Infernity games in this video because 1, I don't really like playing the deck myself, and 2, I will put some games in the description you can watch at your own pace. Maybe you watch this and think Infernity is a deck for you. Maybe I've shown why it's not a super popular deck despite its power. Infernity is trying to say that its first 6, sometimes 7 cards are more powerful than yours, and it will sack you. But I'm saying that strategies not trying to sack turn 1 can be fully equipped to leave the Infernity strategy hopeless. Arguably, Infernity is the deck that abuses Soul Charge the most, but even Infernity can be seen to have big weaknesses. That's how I've come to enjoy Hat format so much, because even its seemingly most powerful card is just another piece of the dueling puzzle. Anyways, subscribe if you're interested in my next video. It would make sense to cover raccoons as I've mentioned them already in the past, and I've topped with a couple raccoon lists, so I'm likely to cover that next. Peace out, gamers.